This coin almost vanished into history, tossed aside, overlooked, dismissed as just another piece of copper, until one moment, one glance, changed everything. Because that ordinary-looking 1944 Lincoln wheat penny, with no mint mark, has been whispered about in collector circles for decades. Not because it's common, but because hidden among millions, there are a few that should never have existed at all. And one of them crossed the line into legend. Imagine this. It's 1944. The world is at war. Metal is scarce. Every ounce of copper is being redirected to support the fight. In fact, just 1 year earlier, in 1943, pennies weren't even made from copper. They were struck in steel. Temporary. Emergency money. But then 1944 arrives, and copper returns. Or at least, that's what was supposed to happen. Because something went wrong inside the U.S. Mint. Something small. Something almost invisible. But that tiny mistake would create one of the most shocking coin discoveries in American history. It looks almost exactly like the penny you might have sitting in your pocket right now. At first glance, the 1944 wheat penny with no mint mark doesn't seem special. It was struck in Philadelphia. No mint mark was standard. Millions were made. Billions, even, when you count all varieties. So why are collectors willing to pay insane prices, sometimes climbing toward $1 million, for a coin that seems so ordinary? The answer lies in a secret buried in metal itself. Because while most 1944 pennies were made from copper, a few, just a few, were struck using leftover steel planchets from 1943. Let that sink in. A 1944 penny, that should be copper, accidentally struck in steel. A mistake so rare, so unexpected, that when the first one was discovered, collectors didn't believe it was real. They thought it was fake. Altered. A trick. But it wasn't. And when authentication confirmed the truth, the entire coin world froze. Because suddenly, a coin that should have been worth a single cent became worth a fortune. But what happened next stunned everyone. One of these rare 1944 steel pennies, yes, a real one, was sold for a price that sent shockwaves through collectors across the country. Auctions turned into battlegrounds. Phones lit up. Dealers scrambled. And in that moment, one simple question echoed louder than anything else. How many more are still out there? That question still hasn't been answered. Because here's the unsettling truth. These coins don't announce themselves. They don't sparkle differently. They don't scream for attention. They hide. They slip through decades unnoticed, passed from hand to hand, dropped into jars, forgotten in drawers, carried in pockets, until someone looks closer. And that's where the story turns personal. Because years after the first discovery, another surfaced. Not in a museum, not in a collector's vault, but in everyday circulation. A man, just an ordinary person, was sorting through his change. No expectations. No special tools. Just curiosity. And then he saw it. Something felt off. The color. The shine. The way it caught the light. It didn't look like copper. It looked different. That moment, that tiny flicker of doubt, changed everything. Because what he held wasn't just a penny. It was a mistake from history. And that mistake would go on to be valued at a level most people never imagine, creeping toward the realm of $1 million. Now here's where it gets even more intense. Because not every unusual 1944 penny is valuable. In fact, most are completely ordinary. And this is where collectors make their biggest mistake. They look at the date and stop there. But the date is only the beginning. The real secret lies in the metal. A genuine rare 1944 steel wheat penny will not look like copper. It will have a silvery, gray appearance, similar to the 1943 steel cents. And here's the first test that separates a dream from reality. A magnet? Yes, something as simple as a magnet can reveal the truth. If your 1944 penny sticks to a magnet, everything changes. Because copper doesn't stick. Steel does. And that one reaction, that single silent pull, can turn an ordinary moment into the discovery of a lifetime. But even that isn't the end. Because counterfeit coins exist, altered coins exist, and collectors have been fooled before. Some people play copper coins to look like steel. Others modify dates to mimic rare versions. That's why weight matters. A genuine steel penny weighs less than a copper one. Subtle, but critical. And the surface, it tells a story too. Authentic steel cents often show specific aging patterns, tiny marks, a certain texture that's hard to fake. But here's the twist that keeps collectors awake at night. There are still coins out there, undiscovered, untested, unnoticed. Coins sitting in old jars. Coins hidden in inherited collections. Coins tucked away in forgotten boxes and attics across America. Each one carrying the possibility of something extraordinary. Each one holding the quiet potential to change someone's life forever. And the 1944 no-mint mark wheat penny sits right at the center of that possibility. Because while most are common, a few are anything but. A few are accidents, frozen in time. A few are worth more than most people earn in years. And somewhere, right now, one could be waiting. Maybe it's in a drawer you haven't opened in years. Maybe it's mixed in with spare change you never thought twice about. Maybe it's already in your possession, and you just haven't noticed yet. That's what makes this so powerful. Because this isn't about rare artifacts locked away in museums. This is about everyday objects, hiding extraordinary value. This is about the moment when curiosity meets opportunity. The moment when someone decides to look closer, just one more time. And everything changes. But here's what you must remember. Not every 1944 penny is worth a fortune. The key is in the details. Look for the color, steel, not copper. Test it with a magnet. If it sticks, that's your first signal. Check the weight, lighter than a standard copper cent. And most importantly, don't rush. Because one careless assumption can turn a potential treasure into a missed opportunity. Collectors who understand this, they don't just look at coins. They study them. They question them. They chase that feeling, that instinct, that something isn't quite right. Because sometimes, that feeling leads to something unbelievable. Something historic. Something life-changing. And the next time you hear coins jingling in your pocket, you might pause. You might wonder. You might take a second look. Because hidden among the ordinary, there are pieces of history waiting to be found. Pieces that were never meant to exist. Pieces that slipped through the cracks of time, and somehow ended up in the hands of everyday people. People just like you. And if you're lucky, if you're observant, if you're willing to look just a little closer, you might be holding one of them. A simple penny. A silent mistake. A forgotten piece of wartime history. Worth far more than anyone ever expected, sometimes reaching toward $1 million. And here's the part that sends chills through every collector who hears it. A man, no expert, no seasoned collector, was digging through a jar of old coins. The kind of jar we all have. Dusty. Forgotten. Filled with loose change that seemed too insignificant to matter. Pennies stacked on pennies. Decades of quiet neglect. And then, He saw it. A 1958 Lincoln wheat penny. No mint mark. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary. In fact, millions of these coins were made. Nothing special, right? That's exactly what he thought. But something didn't sit right. The surface, the shine, the faint, almost ghost-like doubling in the lettering. It was subtle. So subtle that most people would miss it entirely. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. He sent the coin for professional grading. Days passed. Then weeks. And when the results came back, everything changed. Because this wasn't just any 1958 no-mint mark wheat penny. This was one of the rarest error coins ever discovered. Collectors were shocked. Dealers scrambled. And within a short time, that ordinary penny, once nearly thrown away, was valued at over $1 million. A single penny, worth more than most homes. And here's where the story takes an even darker, more fascinating turn. Back in 1958, the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was producing the final batch of wheat pennies before transitioning to the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959. It was the end of an era. Machines were running fast. Dies were wearing down. Pressure was mounting. And somewhere in that chaos, a mistake slipped through. A double die error. Now, most people have never heard of it. But in the world of coin collecting, a double die is the stuff of legend. It happens when the coin die, the tool that stamps the design, is misaligned during production. The result? A coin with duplicated features. Letters appear doubled. Numbers look shadowed. The image itself seems off. But not all doubling is valuable. In fact, most isn't. Which is why this next detail is everything. The 1958 double die obverse penny is one of the rarest coins ever created in the United States. Experts believe only a handful exist. Think about that. Out of billions of pennies, just a few like this. And that's why collectors are willing to pay $1 million to own one. But here's the part that keeps experts awake at night. Because most people don't know what to look for. And that's exactly how these treasures stay hidden. The man who found that coin didn't stumble upon it by luck alone. He noticed something others ignored. He questioned what seemed ordinary. And that's your first clue. Because the difference between a 1-cent coin and $1 million discovery often comes down to a few microscopic details. This is where the mystery deepens. First, the date. That's your starting point. It must be a wheat penny, the kind with 2 wheat stalks on the back instead of the Lincoln Memorial. Next, the mint mark, or rather, the absence of one. No mint mark means it was struck in Philadelphia. That's normal for this coin. But don't let that fool you. This is where most people stop looking. And that's why they miss everything. Because the real secret is hidden in the front design, the obverse. Look closely at the words, Liberty and In God We Trust. On the rare double die version, these letters don't look clean. They look doubled. Not blurry. Not damaged. Doubled. Each letter appears to have a shadow, almost like it's been stamped twice slightly out of alignment. The date itself, 1958, may also show this doubling. And when you see it clearly, it sends chills down your spine. Because you realize, this isn't just a coin. It's a mistake that should never have existed. But here's where things get even more intense. There are fakes. Many of them. Some are altered coins. Others are machine doubling, worthless imitations that trick the untrained eye. And this is where so many people go wrong. They see doubling and assume they've struck gold. But real double die errors have very specific characteristics. The doubling is strong, clear, and consistent. It doesn't look flat or smeared. It looks bold, almost dramatic. Like the coin is trying to reveal its secret, if you're paying attention. And that's why authentication is critical. Because the difference between a fake and the real thing is the difference between 1 cent and $1 million. Now imagine this. You're holding a handful of pennies. You flip through them casually. Most are worn. Some are shiny. All seem forgettable. Until one catches your eye. The date reads 1958. Your heart skips. You check for a mint mark. Nothing. Your fingers tighten slightly. Then you tilt the coin under the light. And suddenly, you see it. A faint doubling in the letters. It's subtle, but it's there. And in that moment, everything changes. Because now, you're not just holding a penny. You're holding a possibility. A question. A life-changing what if? But what happens next could define everything. Because history has already shown us what's possible. It didn't just sell for a high price. It became a legend. A reminder that fortune doesn't always come in obvious ways. Sometimes, it hides in plain sight. And the most extraordinary discoveries come from the most ordinary places. So before you dismiss that jar of coins, before you overlook that handful of pennies, take a closer look. Search for 1958. Check for no mint mark. Study the lettering. Trust your instincts. Because somewhere out there, another one exists. Another coin waiting to be discovered. Another story waiting to unfold. And maybe, just maybe, that story begins with you. And that penny was a 1957 D. Lincoln wheat cent. At first glance, it looks like nothing. Just another worn copper coin, the kind you've probably ignored 1,000 times. But buried in the history of that year, hidden inside the chaos of minting millions upon millions of coins, lies a secret that has driven collectors into a frenzy. Because somewhere out there, a 1957 D penny exists that could be worth over $1 million. But here's where things take a darker turn. In 1957, the Denver Mint was operating at full speed. Machines roared, presses slammed, and coins were produced in staggering quantities. Quality control wasn't what it is today. Tiny mistakes, barely noticeable, slipped through the cracks. Most of those mistakes were harmless. But a few were extraordinary. And one of them would become the kind of discovery that changes a life overnight. Collectors didn't realize it at first. For years, these coins circulated unnoticed, passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket. They jingled in change jars, sat forgotten in drawers, and vanished into piggy banks. Until one day, someone looked closer. What they saw made their heart race. The letters on the coin didn't look right. The date seemed doubled. The details, almost trembling, as if the coin itself had a secret it was trying to reveal. And in that moment, everything changed. Because what they had found was no ordinary 1957 D penny. It was a rare double-die variety, one of the most mysterious and misunderstood minting errors in American coin history. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. When experts examined the coin, they confirmed it. The doubling wasn't damage. It wasn't wear. It was born into the coin itself during the minting process, a flaw so rare and so striking that collectors immediately recognized its potential. The value? It skyrocketed. Thousands turned into tens of thousands. And under the right conditions, with the right clarity, the right preservation, the right intensity of error, some believe these coins could push into the realm of $1 million. That's not a rumor. That's the kind of possibility that keeps collectors awake at night. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. The 1957 DeWitt penny isn't supposed to be rare. Millions were made. Which means the rare ones are hiding in plain sight. And that's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. There are documented cases of people finding valuable coins in the most ordinary places. A forgotten jar. A handful of change from a grocery store. A dusty old collection inherited from a relative. One man, just an average guy, was sorting through pennies he had saved for years. Nothing special. Just loose change he never bothered to spend. Then he saw it. At first, it didn't seem like much, but something felt off. The lettering on Liberty looked strange. The date almost echoed itself. He leaned in closer. And in that moment, his entire future shifted. Because that tiny detail, that almost invisible doubling, was the difference between 1 cent and a life-changing discovery. Collectors were shocked. Dealers scrambled to verify it. And suddenly, a coin that could have been tossed away without a second thought became a symbol of something much bigger. Opportunity. But here's where the tension builds. Not every 1957 D penny is valuable. In fact, most of them are worth just a few cents. This is where the real secret reveals itself. The most valuable versions of the 1957 DeWitt penny show strong doubling, especially in the lettering and the date. You need to look closely at "In God We Trust, Liberty" and the numbers. 1957. If the letters appear duplicated, slightly offset, almost like a shadow or echo, that's your first clue. But be careful. Because many people mistake machine doubling for true double die errors. Machine doubling is common, and it doesn't carry significant value. True double die coins, however, are different. They were created when the die itself, the tool used to strike the coin, was misaligned during production. That means every coin struck from that die carries the same dramatic doubling. And that's what makes them so rare. So rare that collectors will pay extraordinary amounts to own one. But condition matters too. A heavily worn coin might still be valuable, but a well-preserved one, with sharp details and minimal damage, can send the price soaring. And then there's the color. A bright red copper tone, untouched by time, can multiply the value even further. Now imagine this. A pristine 1957 D double die penny. Sharp details. Bold doubling. Brilliant red color. That's the kind of coin that doesn't just sell. It creates headlines. It ignites bidding wars. It becomes the kind of story people talk about for years. And somewhere out there, it could still be waiting. Maybe in a jar. Maybe in your wallet. Maybe in a forgotten collection you haven't looked at in years. Most people would never recognize it. They'd spend it without thinking. They'd overlook the very detail that makes it extraordinary. And just like that, a potential million-dollar discovery would disappear back into circulation. Gone. Forgotten. Lost again. Unless someone like you knows what to look for. Because now, you're not just looking at pennies the same way. Now, every coin carries a question. Collectors chase that feeling. That moment of realization. That split second where everything changes. And it always starts the same way. With a coin that looks completely normal. Until it doesn't. Until you see it. Until your heart starts pounding and you realize. This is different. This is rare. This is something the world has been searching for. And that's why the 1957 DeWitt penny continues to captivate collectors even today. Not because every coin is valuable, but because one of them might be. And that possibility is worth everything. So the next time you come across a penny, don't ignore it. Don't assume it's worthless. Look closer. Study the details. Because hidden within that tiny piece of copper could be a story waiting to unfold, a discovery waiting to be made, a fortune waiting to be claimed. And if you're lucky, if you're paying attention, you might just find the one. The one that turns pocket change into history. The one that transforms an ordinary moment into something unforgettable. The one that proves treasure isn't always buried deep. Sometimes, it's been in your hands all along. But one worn-out penny, yes, a single, copper-colored whisper from 1955, ignited a frenzy that left seasoned collectors speechless, and turned pocket change into a story worth nearly $1 million. And here's the part that should make your heart race. That same coin could still be out there. Right now. Maybe even closer than you think. Because hidden within the legacy of the 1955 Lincoln wheat penny lies a mystery so strange, so misunderstood, that even experienced collectors have missed it for decades. And the ones who didn't, they never forgot what they found. It begins in 1955, a year when the United States Mint was operating under pressure. Demand for coins was surging. Machines ran longer. Dies wore down faster. And in the chaos of mass production, something unusual slipped through. Something small. Something almost invisible. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Most people know 1955 for one legendary mistake, the famous double-dyed penny. But while collectors were chasing that headline-grabbing error, something quieter, more subtle, was quietly escaping into circulation from the Denver Mint. The 1955 wheat penny. At first glance, it looks ordinary. A simple profile of Abraham Lincoln on the front, wheat stalks framing the reverse. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. And yet, beneath that calm surface, a handful of these coins carried anomalies that would later send shockwaves through auctions and private collections. We're talking about rare die errors, off-metal strikes, strange planchet variations, microscopic doubling that only reveals itself under scrutiny, coins that were never supposed to exist. And for years, they went unnoticed. A man sorting through an old jar of pennies inherited from his grandfather. Nothing special, just decades of forgotten change. He almost didn't bother looking closely. But something caught his eye. A 1955 penny, slightly different in tone. The weight felt off. The strike, just a bit unusual. He nearly tossed it aside. But what happened next stunned even him. That coin, dismissed at first glance, turned out to be struck on the wrong planchet. A rare minting error so scarce that only a handful have ever been confirmed. When it hit auction, collectors didn't just show interest. They battled. The final price? A number that crept higher and higher until it crossed into the realm of dreams. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And whispers in the collecting world suggested, under the right conditions, with the right rarity and preservation, a coin like this could push toward $1 million. Now here's where the story takes a darker, more intriguing turn. Not every valuable 1955 penny looks dramatic. In fact, the most valuable ones often hide behind subtle details that most people overlook. Tiny shifts in metal composition. Faint doubling that dances along the lettering. A slightly misaligned strike that feels almost accidental. These aren't the errors you notice in a second. They're the ones that reveal themselves only to the patient, the curious, the relentless. And that's exactly why they're still out there. But here's the chilling truth. Most of these coins have likely already passed through thousands of hands, spent at gas stations, dropped into vending machines, forgotten in drawers. Each time, just one glance away from being recognized, or lost forever. And yet, every so often, one reappears. And when it does, the entire market takes notice. Dealers start making calls. Collectors lean in closer, because they know this isn't just a coin. It's a ticking time capsule of value. But what makes one 1955 penny worth a few cents, while another could be worth $1 million? The answer lies in the details most people never think to check. And missing them could cost you everything. Start with the mint mark. Look just below the date, 1955. That tiny D is your first clue. It tells you the coin was struck in Denver. But don't stop there, because the real story begins when you look closer. Examine the surface carefully. Does the metal look consistent or slightly unusual? Some rare versions were struck on experimental or mismatched planchets, giving them a different color or weight. Now tilt the coin under light. Watch how the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust behave. That subtle detail could be the difference between a common coin and something extraordinary. But here's where it gets even more intense. Check the alignment. Rotate the coin slowly. Because those imperfections, they're not flaws. They're signatures. Proof that something went wrong during minting. And in the world of coin collecting, wrong can mean priceless. Now imagine this. You're holding a handful of pennies. One of them feels no different than the rest. Same size, same weight, same dull copper shine. But hidden within it, a story, a mistake, a moment in history that defied the odds. And that moment could be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Collectors have spent years chasing these coins. Some have built entire careers around finding just one. Others? They've walked past them without ever knowing. And that's the part that keeps experts awake at night. Because the next record-breaking discovery won't happen in a museum. It won't come from a vault. It'll come from someone ordinary. Someone curious enough to look twice. Someone willing to question what everyone else ignores. So before you dismiss another penny, before you toss it aside without a second thought, remember this. The 1955 Lincoln Wheat penny isn't just a relic of the past. It's a hidden opportunity. A silent contender. A piece of history that still moves through the world, unnoticed, waiting. Waiting for the right person to see it for what it truly is. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a coin sitting in a jar, a drawer, or the corner of a forgotten wallet. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But it carries a secret that could change everything. And when someone finally recognizes it, when they see the signs others missed, the outcome won't just be surprising. It'll be life-changing. So take another look. Check your change. Search those old collections. Because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million.